My name is Patrick Jones. I run the Institute for Public Policy and Economics here at the Catalyst Building for Eastern Washington University. And today marks the first of our speaker series of business leadership that is in its third year. And we're happy you're here. And I hope you'll be happy by the end of today that you've come, because I think you're really in for a treat. The goal of these talks is quite straightforward. This applies largely to students, but anybody else. We first of all want to listen to a successful business person, very often alum, but not always, and tell us what they do and how they got there. Secondly, we want to be inspired by the stories that you hear, and I think if my perusal of the slides is any indication, you'll be pretty inspired. And then last but not least, we want you to have fun. And to that end, there's food and drink, but it's not until the end, so you got to stick around. 3 parts to tonight. We're going to hear from our speaker. We have a presentation, PowerPoint, that I think you'll very much like. Then Professor John Dunlop of management here at the School of Business is going to prime the pump with some questions, and we hope that all of you would have some questions besides Professor Dunlop. And for those of you who are viewing this online, we do have a way of taking questions as well during the general session. So put your thinking caps on and don't be too shy about asking a question. And then at the end, as I said, there's food and drink, and our team has, since we expected a big turnout, I think we'll have enough food for you, but we'll see. So before we introduce the speaker, I'd like to introduce our president, Dr. Shari McMahan, our Zumba teacher president, if you folks don't know that. Was the class today or was it tomorrow? It was today. So anybody go to President McMahon Zumba? Oh, we got one hand go up. All right. Okay, there'll be more. So big round of applause for our president.
Thank you. Exercise is important, right? For all of us, it's part of wellness, right? Makes you happy. And I'm always happy because I get to see so many wonderful students out there. So I am also going to join our faculty and staff from the School of Business and Accounting and Institute for Public Policy and Economic Analysis as well for organizing this magnificent speaker series. So if this is the first time you've been to one, you are in for a great surprise, and they happen throughout the year, and we will welcome that continually because we're so proud of it. And as president of Eastern, I'm committed to making applied learning an essential part of the students' educational journey. You know, where their education expands beyond the classroom, and that's what it's about. We say we are the region's Polytech for a reason. And this speaker series is a great example of providing opportunities for students alongside our community members to hear from and engage with leaders in the business and entrepreneurial communities. So it's to learn, to grow, and to see possibilities for your own future. Now, we are very honored tonight and excited to have Paul Stringer present. He is a proud alumnus and a great example of how Eastern prepares students for success in their career path and beyond. And I say beyond since Paul followed his heart to the golf industry after his teaching career. Paul, you are an Eagle for life, and thank you for taking the time to be with us here during our homecoming week too. So it's a very special week for us at Eastern. So let's give him a warm welcome and invite him up here. Come on up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back here in Spokane and Cheney and come back to my roots, really. Being a 79 graduate, nobody in this room was probably born then, so that makes me feel even older. But no, it's always a pleasure to come back, and I do a lot of different conferences and summits, but it's mainly about the golf business. And I thought today I would share with you some business tips and advice, as well as some of my experiences in the job that I've done. And as you heard earlier, I started out at Eastern in education. I was going to be the world's greatest coach and teacher. And I started out that way, but I'd played on the golf team for 4 years, and some of our golfers that I played with are here today. But, you know, when you get golf in your blood, you can't get rid of it. And as a serious golfer, after teaching 4 years in Eastern Oregon, I wanted to get back into the golf business. So you can see on the screen here, the golf course in the background is the club at Snoqualmie Ridge. And some of you may know this, that's on the west side of the mountains, but this was a course that I did a contract with Weyerhaeuser at the time, who was the biggest landowner in the country at that time. And they wanted to do a residential development around a championship golf course. And so we did this, and Jack came in and designed it, and it was a great golf course. They still have the Boeing Classic on the Champions Tour, very successful, and very proud of this. But that was one of our only courses here in the state of Washington. And I'll give you a little bit more on some of the states and the countries that we've designed in. When they asked me to talk a little bit about some of my different successes and the things that I did, you can see I started at Sammamish High School. Anybody from the west side know about Sammamish High School? Okay, so I relocated to Bellevue after my sophomore year. I was down in California at a big high school called Catella High School. And my dad got transferred, so we moved up to Bellevue, and I got on the golf team. And we had lived in Spokane during my second and third grade year, so I had always liked Spokane, so I thought, okay, I'd like to go to college somewhere. And I had narrowed it down to like Gonzaga and Eastern. And I really liked the climate at Eastern, and I liked the fact that Cheney was a little bit outside of Spokane, so that's where I decided to go. I graduated, as I said, in education. Some of you might know University High School. I did my student teaching at University High School, and sat on the bench coaching basketball with a gentleman named Marv Ainsworth, who was a very good basketball coach. And that was a great experience. And so as I did that, one of the things that was interesting, and this goes back to kind of the learning process, is Spokane, as you know, in the winter can be harsh. I was living in an apartment and student teaching in the winter quarter. And you don't ever want to do that, but that's what I did. So I had a Nissan B210 hatchback. Most of you in this room don't even know what that is, but it was a small hatchback car. And I didn't have a garage because I was in an apartment. And for a week, it was 30 to 35 below zero every night. So they said, if you don't get out and start your car sometime during the night, it's going to freeze and you're not going to get it started in the morning. And I was so nervous about being late student teaching. And I was teaching classes at the time. I had 3 different classes and coaching. So I set my alarm for 2 in the morning for a week straight, slept in my sweats, ran out, started the car, got it going, ran back in, set the alarm for 6, and away we go. So fast forward, after teaching for 4 years, I was tenured, which basically means they have to find cause to fire you. And I really enjoyed it, but I really missed golf. And my wife, who also went to Eastern, she graduated in international business, and she wanted to get her master's down in Phoenix. We had gone down there on vacation, and we loved it. So I walked into our principal, and I said, Don, I got to tell you, I've got bad news. And he said, what's that? I said, I've got to resign. He said, what do you mean resign? I said, I'm going to move down to Arizona. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to get in the golf business. He said, do you have a job? I said, no. He said, does your wife have a job? I said, no, but we're both educated and we have a vision of what we want to do. So I loaded up the U-Haul. She went down a week ahead, found an apartment, and I got back into the golf business. And so the rest is kind of history. So that's how I got my start, and then I became an assistant professional, and as you grow, you become a head professional, then a general manager, and I went to a conference, and at that time I was a board member of the Southwest Section PGA, which is a pretty big deal. It's the second largest section in the country, and what it really does is it makes some governance and some standards for the pros in the particular area. So I was lucky enough to serve on the board, and we went to a golf show in Las Vegas, and I was introduced to a guy that had just started a company called Troon Golf. His name was Dana Garmany, who's now a dear friend of mine. And so we met, and I was working at another club, a private club, 36 holes, and he was just starting Troon Golf, which was a golf management and development company out of Scottsdale. And he says, hey, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm working at this club and doing different things. And he said, can you send me your resume? He said, we're just getting started with Troon Golf, and we're always looking for good people. So I sent him my resume, and he calls me a week later and says, hey, I want to interview you at a particular course that they managed with our vice president, see if there might be a good fit. Well, one thing led to another, and I got hired like a week later to go with Troon Golf. Fast forward from that, I was doing manuals, and I was writing policies and procedures and operations and all these things, and most of it, I was kind of winging it, but I had experience enough that I could figure it out. So he said, could you go down to Tucson? There's a club there that we just opened. The general manager's having a tough time with the owner. We need somebody to go down there and fix it. And I said, sure, no problem. So I go down to Tucson, and I get involved with the ownership and do all these things. So I'm there for about a year, and he says, he used to call me every night to find out what our numbers were, because he was growing and he wanted to know how well we were doing. We were doing good. So he calls me on a Sunday night, and I'm at the golf course, and like some of the people here, you know what it's like if you're working sun up to sundown 7 days a week, and that's what I was doing. So he says, what are you doing next week? And I said, I'll be working here. And he said, can you come up? He said, I've got Greg Norman coming up to Scottsdale, and he wants to talk about doing a joint venture with us. How many know Greg Norman? Okay. How many in here are golfers, by the way? Show of hands. Or play golf? How many have been to Top Golf? How many have been to Pop Stroke or putting course? Okay, so most people. So anyway, I go up, I meet Greg Norman. And you know, I was a golfer, and I idolized all these people, right? So here's Greg Norman from Australia coming in, and we hit it off, and he said, what we're going to do is I'm going to design courses, Troon's going to manage and develop them, and we're doing a joint venture with Macquarie Bank out of Sydney, and they were a big investment bank right in the heart of Sydney. So Dana says, hey, fly over there, take your wife, see if you guys like it. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to like Sydney, Australia. So I fly over there with my wife, we like it, we move there, so we're there for 3 years, developing and building golf courses with Greg Norman. And that was a great experience. So then Dana says to me, he says, this is like my last year, he says, Starwood Capital and Goldman Sachs are looking at portfolios in Tokyo. And this was during the crash time, and a lot of Japanese owners went bankrupt because they had golf courses and they had these huge portfolios, but they loved golf. And so they had these golf courses, and Starwood Capital and Goldman Sachs needed to know what the valuation of the golf courses were. So Dana said, I want you to go up there, hire some people, open an office, and figure the valuations out and get the information back to us so Starwood and Goldman Sachs can know what the value of these golf courses are. I said, no problem. I'd never been to Tokyo. I'd never hired staff. So I go up there, and just picture yourself now. You go to Tokyo back then, and I'm in the subway. None of the signs at that time were in English, and I missed so many stops, it was crazy. And then I'd have to get out and come back. I'd miss a stop because nobody would tell me where I was, and so I just figured it out. Hired a staff, and we went to these different golf courses, and we did evaluation, and continued to grow that way. And I did probably 15 or 20 of them, and then I moved back to the US. It was time for a guy to come and replace me in Australia because it was a 3-year assignment. But what a great experience that was. What I set up here on this Finding Your Path to Success, I'm going to tell you a lot of stories tonight, and hopefully I don't bore you with some of these stories because some of them are funny, some of them aren't. But you can see that's our office where I am now in West Palm Beach. That's our boardroom and the entrance of our office, kind of a modern office. But what I put up here is choose your terrain, and talking about small or mid-size companies versus large companies versus self-owned companies. So our company is the largest golf course design company in the world. We've got about 40 people, 30 in Palm Beach, another 10 to 15 out in the field. Designers, representatives of ours in many different locations. I like that size company because it encourages versatility. In other words, you get to help make some decisions in a small staff, and your decision can make a difference. Quicker decisions are made. We make our decisions. I have kind of a free way to go about doing my business because they have confidence in me and we've been successful, so they leave me alone basically, but I report to a board every quarter. And then there's large companies, Googles, Amazons of the world. How many know about Amazon? How many of you know that they don't seem to mind when people leap over their direct report and go to that boss because they like people to move quickly through the company. So following protocol doesn't always follow a regular business way of doing things. Not my personal cup of tea, but it works for Amazon. And you talk about a pivot. I mentioned that earlier in my opening page about pivoting. There's so many times in my career where I've had to pivot because things change. Look at Amazon. Started out as a shoe company. Look where they are today. Google. I love some of the other stories about self-employed. How many of you know the story about the CEO and chairman of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang? Okay, so here's a funny story. His parents lived in Taiwan. They wanted their kids to go to school in the US. So they went online, they did some research, and they sent their kids to a school in Kentucky. But there was one problem. It was a reformed school for bad kids. And so he and his brother got beat up many times in school until they finally told their parents, hey, look, this isn't the kind of school we were going to go to. So the parents came over and they settled in Portland. And he graduated from a high school in Portland, went to Oregon State engineering, then went to Stanford. But he and a couple of his partners, and then later his wife, started basically NVIDIA. And now they're a $4.5 trillion company. So it can happen to anybody. You just got to have a little passion, a little bit of drive. One thing that's kind of interesting, I put this stat in here because I was telling somebody at lunch today, my dad worked the same job his whole career. One company, one job. And many people in that generation did the same thing. Now the average time is 3.9 years for one job. That's not very long. So people are constantly changing and pivoting. That doesn't mean it's good, that doesn't mean it's bad, it's just the way it is. You might be somewhere, I've been at Nicklaus now since early 2003, so that I'm going on my 23rd year. But I also had, my first job was teaching, and I taught for 4 years. Great experience, but it was a pivot. So you're going to have those opportunities. Choose your terrain. A couple of interesting slides here. You'll notice up in this slide, the Vietnam caddies. All the caddies in Vietnam are girls. And they're just delightful. And while they don't speak a lot of English, they do a very, very good job, and they're very friendly, and they're very helpful. They carry all their yardages. They can tell you exactly how the hole plays. And, you know, you don't need to have a language to be able to communicate. And that's what's really interesting. The one on the right is a club that we manage in Beijing called Nicklaus Club Beijing. And again, most of the caddies are girls, and they have housing, staff housing on site. And these gals are young, and they have full uniforms, and it's actually a pretty good way of life. But I go over there, I'm in Asia probably 6 times a year, and I go to 5 or 6 countries. We're doing a lot of work in Vietnam. We've opened 8 courses in Vietnam with another 15 under contract. We did 30 courses in China, 26 in Japan. We're big into Korea, a lot of different places. But it's been very successful over there. And then here, I'm at a place called Bear's Best Chonga, where I did the contract and signed off on them opening the course, but it's a very busy public golf course. They do about 110,000 rounds a year, and that's the same climate as New York. So to get 110,000 rounds, you know they're playing during the winter too. So why do employees leave their jobs? Lack of career advancement, toxic work environment, poor management, work-life balance, I'll talk about that in a minute. Inadequate compensation or raises, and lack of recognition. You may look at those 4 or 5 and say, there's one there that really resonates with me. For me, I don't like toxic work environments. Work-life balance, I've figured that out, and I'll give you some hints about that. Lack of recognition, I always felt like if you did your job and you excelled at what you did, you'd get recognized. Not all companies compensate well, so that's a decision you have to make later, but give your boss a reason to pay you more. Find a way to do that. Some positive attributes for employers. Humility. I still haven't forgot where I came from. I've been on my own since I was 18, so I learned the hard way. And so, you know, being humble, I think, is a great asset for you going into a business. Adaptable and flexibility. How well do you work with your coworkers or your clients or the people around you? What I look for in employees are self-starters, problem solvers. I like people to come up with hey, look, we all come across a lot of problems. Who comes up with some possible solutions? That's who I want on my team. And I want to be surrounded by people that are positive, creative, likability. You know, they say you have 30 seconds to make an impression. In Asia, it's less than that. And I was telling somebody today, they like seeing me because I'm not only president of the company, but they see that I'm an old guy. And they like old guys because they have some wisdom and they have some experience and they think you know what you're talking about, and hopefully I do. So wisdom goes a long way, but you guys are young, you'll develop that. This was actually in Amsterdam this summer. It was a great trip. We license our Jack Nicklaus apparel. It's the Golden Bear apparel. And we have licensees in Korea and Japan and Indonesia and Mexico and Italy and Europe. And so we invite the licensees and they come and look at the line and buy their clothes for the upcoming season. And I usually present something on design and what we're doing in that part of the world. you can see on this one, it's probably not clear from where you were, but a couple pictures with Jack, who's the GOAT, greatest of all time. They would host a Christmas party every year, he and his wife, Barbara. My wife up there on the right. That was when Jack won the Presidential Medal of Freedom. George Bush was there. I was in the rotunda with Jack. It was a great experience, and one of the attendees at the time, not yet, but President Trump and Melania. And there were a lot of athletes and other people there. It was a great experience. You can't probably see from the back here, but I'm shaking hands with a gal who was the executive of a company, a big conglomeration in all places, Serbia. So I was in Belgrade, and we're going to do our first golf course there. A couple other pictures, but one of the interesting things, this is, some of you people might not know everybody, but Ricky Fowler. This was at the Ryder Cup in Italy. Anybody recognize this? You probably wouldn't, because it's a 5-pound note. And Jack Nicklaus was the only person on a 5-pound note outside the royal family. And that came because we had an endorsement with Royal Bank of Scotland, RBS, and they printed out 2 million of these 5-pound notes a day for 4 days of the tournament. This is 2005 when Jack played his last British Open at St. Andrews, home of golf. So one of the nice things they did is they put Jack's face on the front and on the back the little bear that says Nicklaus. Okay, so they sold 2 million of those a day for 4 days. They opened the stand. They had all these stands on the golf course that were RBS stands. In 30 minutes, they sold 2 million 5-pound notes. And they were sold out for the day, and then they'd start the next day. I've got a few of them at home, but we saw on eBay a few years ago, they were selling it at $10,000 because they were signed 5-pound notes. Global perspective, lessons abroad. This was really, oh, by the way, this is Serbia. Look up the history of Serbia. That was from the war in the 80s, and we're doing a golf course today there. So a lot of history involved with my job that I've learned over the years. Vision, recognizing potential in people. Negotiation, I put up there, silence sometimes is louder than words. There's times when I'm negotiating an agreement where I just let whoever I'm negotiating with talk and talk and talk and talk, and I'll have a translator that works for me, and I'll say to them, what are they saying? Especially in China, I had this, I'll tell you a story about a couple of gals that work for me there, but they would be talking in circles over and over and over. And I'd say to Jennifer, was the gal translating, I'd say, Jennifer, what's he saying? She said, oh, he's not really saying anything. I said, he's been talking for half an hour. What's he saying? She said, nothing, really. He's just stalling out. And I said, oh, okay. So you got to know when to be silent and when to be able to speak, building trust. And in Asia especially, there are a lot of places throughout the world, having a meal with somebody means a lot. And you can learn a lot about a person by having dinner with them. But you're sitting next to the chairman of these big companies. They could be car companies, they could be tech companies. I've been with a lot of different people. And when you sit with them, you just observe and you can figure it out. You know what they're about by just having a meal with them. This was building a course up in Vietnam. Again, most of the people that work on the golf courses are ladies. The guys don't like to do it. This was interesting. This was outside of Singapore in the Causeway in Indonesia. I show up, our Chinese rep, because this was a Chinese developer, says, oh, we're going to go look at this site. And I said, Marcia, where is it? And she says, well, we got to get on this boat, and we're going to go down a river, and we're going to look at the site. So I said, okay. So you can't really see it, but this is the boat we're going down this river in. It's just a little flat boat. And these two Chinese guys come out because it's a Chinese company, and they don't know anything about golf, and they're in suits. And it's like 95 degrees in the shade, right? And they've got suits on. So we go on this boat, and we're going down, and that's where this picture's taken. This is the site. That's all it was, mangroves. And it was on an island. And I said, so Marcia, where is that site? She said, that's it. I said, that's where they want to build the golf course. Yep, they're going to do a hotel and a golf course. So we did a golf course there, and we built it in 8 months. It usually takes 2 years to do. It was an incredible success story. They built a hotel in 7 months, driving these pilings into the mud. It was a terrible sight. One on the right bottom there, that's me at a golf course site in Vietnam and one up in Saudi Arabia. We've got 3 golf courses going on in Saudi Arabia. Jack Nicklaus Golf Club Korea, this is an interesting story. So in 2004, 2005, this guy calls me. His name's Stan Gill. He's out of New Jersey, but a developer. He used to call me Paulie. I don't know why, but he called me Paulie. He said, I'm going to do a golf course outside of Seoul in Songdo. How many people have been to Korea? Show of hands. Okay. And I'm going to do an 18-hole championship golf course, and I'm going to have Central Park, and we're going to have condominiums, and it's going to be state-of-the-art. I said, okay, Stan. So I go over there, and it's 1,500 acres, right? Half of it, so now we're at 750 acres, which is a lot of land, is underwater. Underwater. So I said, Stan, half of the site's underwater. He said, yeah, but come over here. And we walked down this path, and there's these huge pipes where they were filling in sand from the Bay of Incheon. Bay of Incheon. Now that should ring a bell. That's where MacArthur landed in 1950 and basically saved Korea from the communists. North Korea had invaded Seoul. They were at the gateway of Seoul, and MacArthur single-handedly, along with his guys, got the North Koreans out of South Korea, and great history story. But our golf course was right where he landed, Bay of Incheon. So anyway, fast forward, we built a championship golf course. You can see the city up on the top with the towers. He said, come up to my office in New York and you can see what's happening there. Very first day of sales, they're wrapped around the building in line to buy these condos. They sold 24 condo towers on a weekend. 24. These are high-rise condos. So very successful. It was a joint venture with POSCO, who's one of the largest steel manufacturers in the world. And so anyway, we hosted the President's Cup. They sold memberships, 250 memberships at $1 million US. So this is my second year at Nicklaus, and I had a boss who was a AAA personality, let's put it that way. And we were selling Jack Nicklaus signature contracts at $2.5 million at the time. So I was negotiating with them, and I got them up to 2.25, and they were at 1.5 to begin with. So I got to 2.25, and I thought, man, this is great. I'm at 2.25. I came back and told my boss, we're at 2.25, and he goes, Paul, he said, if we don't get to 2.5, we're not doing the deal. I said, Tim, we can't get there. He said, you find a way. So I went back and I was thinking about how do I get above that? So the only way I could figure it out is getting a participation either on the real estate or the memberships. So what I did is I said, look, we'll help you sell the memberships, but we want 5%. And they negotiated it down to 4%, and I agreed to 4%. 4% of memberships that we sold 250 at $1 million. That's still one of our most lucrative contracts. It's over 10 million, 11 million right now and running because it's in perpetuity. It goes on. So very big success story. You see the bridge in the background. The bridge is 23 kilometers. They built it in 18 months. National Geographic did a special on this thing. It was tidal, so it moved 30 feet in an evening in the bay, and they put all those pieces. It's like the 4th or 5th largest span bridge in the world. But if you didn't take that bridge, it'd take you 2 hours to go all the way down to Seoul and turn around and come back to Incheon. That's 25 minutes from the airport now in Seoul. And when I first went to Seoul, they didn't have the airport there like they have now at Incheon. It was Gimpo, which was down kind of by downtown Seoul. Very small, old airport, way overgrown. Cap Cana in Dominican Republic, 17,000 acre site. First time I walked this site with the developer, we're walking and it's nothing but beaches and mangroves and palm trees and squatters. And this guy's name's Ricardo Hazuri. I said, Ricardo, where are you going to do the golf course? Right here, he said. So we ended up developing this golf course. Has 10 holes on the ocean or 11 holes on the ocean. We've had some big tournaments there. They're selling green fees now at $450 a night. They just built a new St. Regis there, and it's been voted #1 golf course in Latin America. Very proud of that contract. Russia, some good stories today at lunch, but we've done 3 courses in Russia. This is a while back before all the stuff that's going on now with Ukraine. St. Basil's Cathedral, you can see me there in one of the photos with our team. 1555, that cathedral was built in Red Square. It's phenomenal. I wish we could still travel into Russia because they've got some beautiful architecture. But you can see the quality of golf that we did there. So I was telling these people at lunch today, I got invited, one of 5 people invited in 2006 to go to Moscow and meet with Mayor Lushkov, Yuri Lushkov. He was the mayor of Moscow from 92 to like 2006 or 2008. And the idea was that he was developing Moscow to a modern city, and he wanted to do golf. So he reached out to me, land planner, clubhouse architect, and a couple other people. So there's 5 of us that are presenting in a small room to Lushkov and his cabinet. And it's all being translated. So I'm doing a slide presentation talking about development of golf. They don't know golf at all, so I'm trying to explain every step of the construction, everything else. So our rep, who I hired, he was a guy that was an attorney that went over to Moscow. They had hired like 15 US attorneys to start the lottery system in Moscow. And this was one of the guys that did that, and he stayed there to be an expat attorney. So I met him, I found out about him, I said, would you like to rep for us in Moscow? We've got some opportunities. Well, he said, he set this up for me to come and do this presentation. And I said, well, they need to pay for the expenses. That's one thing that we've got to cover is my expenses. So I built in a little bit of expense for the travel and the hotel and everything. And it was in a kind of international hotel in the heart of Moscow. So he said, they'll reimburse you. And I said, when will they do that? Before you leave. So it's like an hour before I'm going to leave. Still no reimbursement. So I said, Vincent, when are they going to do the reimbursement? He said, just a minute. And he said, in 5 minutes, you're supposed to go up to the 2nd floor. So I went up to the 2nd floor. The door was locked. There's 2 guys out front guarding the door. And then they open the door and I walk in. And they've got a list. And they said, your name. Translator says your name. And the 2 guys at the table were like 6'7" and 280, right? In fatigues. No nonsense. So they look at the list, see Paul Stringer, and it was like $13,000 US. Only they had paid you in rubles. So go home tonight and look at what the exchange was then in rubles to US dollars. But the guy gets under the desk and he puts this stack on top of the table. They're all rubles. So now I've got 45 minutes to get to the airport to catch my flight, and I've got all these rubles, and all I've got on is a leather jacket. I've changed, taken off my suit, got a leather jacket on, and my briefcase. I put what I can in the briefcase. Now I've still got a big stack. So I fill up my leather jacket until I look like I'm pregnant. And I go downstairs, and there's an exchange window, and I said to the gal, I said, will you exchange rubles for dollars? She says, yeah. And I said, okay. I open my jacket, and I go, okay, here you go. So she counts them all up, and she had just enough money to pay me in US dollars. The guy behind me couldn't cash his because I took them all. It was just one of those type of stories. But the other thing I was going to tell you about Russia that was interesting when I was there, and for any of you traveling back then, it was different. But I would travel with a passport. In time, the US passports, you could get refilled, and they just put more pages and more pages. So my passport was like this thick. You can't do that anymore. They don't allow you. It was about like that thick with all these different visas in it and everything else. So I go up to passport control, give them my passport, and I'm standing there thinking, okay, they're just going to wave me through, right? And nothing happens. All of a sudden, the guy comes up, and he goes like this. So I follow him. We go down this hallway. And Moscow airports at the time were not the nicest. Let's just leave it at that. So we go in this little box. I call it holding cell. And I was in there. It was a little desk, little area with a metal chair. I sat in there for 45 minutes. Nobody talked to me. Nobody came by. The door was shut. It was one of those stories where you think now, looking back at it today, it's lucky I got out of there. And somehow, some way, they didn't like what was in either the country I'd been to. So I've traveled to over almost 100 countries now. And United Nations recognizes 193. So I've been to about half the countries in the world. And there was probably a country in my passport they didn't like. So they were making me sweat it out, which I did. But anyway, we were successful there. Turkmenistan, we did a golf course. This second hardest country to get into next to North Korea for Americans. The only way I get in there is through a diplomatic pouch, which I can get through the embassy. But we did a golf course there. They've got about 8 million people, very rich in natural gas, and they trade that to Russia for gas and oil. And this is their former president with Jack. They built this. The first time I went there, there was nothing there, and now it's become a modern place. This is Ashgabat, which is their capital city, but that's a hotel. That's a wedding chapel of all things. And then we built the golf course, and we hope to get a couple more golf courses there. But I had to go there quite a bit to make sure the construction was on time and we were on budget. They had never built a golf course, so it was a big learning curve. They speak Russian there. Nicklaus Club Beijing. Just a quick one here. First time I went on the Great Wall. If any of you have an opportunity to travel to China, go to the Great Wall. It's the best experience of your life. 5,000 kilometers. They built this over many dynasties. And if you can imagine stacking the rocks and all these supplies up there back then, it's just a miracle that it happened. On the right are the two gals that I hired. And the story about this one gal, Jennifer, this is Jennifer and Marcia. Jennifer, we hired in 2005. We were doing a conference, and it was at the Beijing Conference Center. And so I needed a translator because we were there and there was Chinese owners coming and we need somebody to translate. So we asked this gal that was running, do you have any translators? Well, this girl just is graduating from college. Let's have her come. And I said, great. So she didn't know anything about golf, but we started working with her and talking to her about golf. So we had this old, excuse my old language here. We had this old CD of Jack and golf courses and everything else, and it runs on a loop. But the organizer of the event wanted like $300 a day for a TV to play this thing. And I was like, no, we're not going to do that for 3 days. So I said to Jennifer, Jennifer, is there an appliance store somewhere near here or an electronics store where we can get a small TV? She said, yeah. She looked on her phone. There's one down the street. I said, let's go. So we jump in a cab. We go down to this appliance store. I had her hold the cab. We pick out a TV in there, throw it in the cab, go back to the conference center. I think I paid like $150 for 3 days, which they were going to charge me $900 or something ridiculous. So we get done with the conference. I've got to go back to the US, and here's this pretty big TV. So I said, Jennifer, today's your lucky day. She said, what do you mean? I said, this TV's going back with you. So I gave the cab driver a little more and put it in the cab, and I told the cab driver, you take it up to her apartment for her. She had 3 roommates at the time, just finishing up school, so great story. Saudi Arabia. Wow, this is a different place, huh? So we're building this golf course. Look up Qiddiya online. You'll see what they're doing there. They're doing a Six Flags park. They're doing Formula One. They've got a couple golf courses. And we've got 3 projects under development there. I first went there in 2019 and talked to one of the gentlemen that was responsible for Aramco, which is one of the biggest oil and gas companies in the world. Pretty tough guy, but it turned out good. This golf course is going to be spectacular. Vietnam, yeah, that's me on the face of Vietnam golf 2 months ago, I think it was, which was a great honor. I'm meeting the Prime Minister here. I went up to Washington, D.C. and met him. We did a 10-course deal in Vietnam with a gal by the name of Madam Na, who I've gotten to know, and that's me just after we signed the course contract. Some of the caddies at one of the golf courses. It's been a great experience in Vietnam. Built some really nice golf courses in some really different terrains. Morocco. The story about the souk markets, look up souk markets in Morocco. This is, by the way, in Marrakesh. We did a course at the bottom of the Atlas Mountains. It's beautiful. But souk markets. So I tell this guy, we're building this golf course, the one up on the upper left here, Michelin. It was done by Ifran, which is a big railroad company, state-owned company. That was one of the hardest contracts I ever did. They speak Arabic and French, and they use the words interchangeably. So I studied French in school, so I could pick up some of it, but it got difficult. But we got it done, and Jack came for the first visit, and they said, oh, we want to take Jack to the souk market. I said, I don't think he really has time for the souk market, but anyway, Jack agreed to it. This is in Fez. Look up Fez, Morocco. So I said to the guy, I said, look, Jack needs security. He can't go through this market without security. And he said, how many people do you need? And I said, well, it's a market, so somewhere between 6 and 10 people. And he said, okay, we'll get it done. So we're walking through there, and they've got live goats, they've got silver for sale, they've got this, they've got chickens getting their heads cut off, they're doing leather goods, all this kind of stuff. It's fascinating to see because it's wild. So we're walking through, and it's like this going through the market. And I turned and looked at the guy, and I said, I thought you said you'd have 6 or 8 or 10 guys that were going to be, security for Jack. He says, they're here. You just don't see them. They were dressed in traditional garb, but they were walking with us. I flew around a lot in Jack's plane. It was a G400, and then it was a G500 and 550. This bird is the new airport in Ashgabat. First time I went there, it was deplorable. You wouldn't want to land there. I won't even tell you stories. And then bullet train I used a lot in China and Japan. And this was kind of funny. When we were in Serbia, this guy says, we're going to have the pilot fly you guys around and look at the site for the golf course. I said, great. I've been in many helicopters, and most of them are a little bigger than this. So we go to this place, and it's kind of in a farm pasture land area. And this guy opens up the garage door and wheels out the helicopter. Doesn't speak any English. It's this guy here. So we jump in the back, and he's flying around. And this dates me, but there was a show called Magnum P.I. on TV, and remember the helicopter making the dips and all that? This guy decides he's going to do that with us, right? So he's just taking it, and we said, look, just go spend some time flying over the site. That's it. That's all we want to see, and then we'll go back. So we do that, and then he decides that he's going to be the helicopter pilot on Magnum P.I., and he takes a dip, and he's following the river like this, and we're like that far from the river. But it worked out. The coffee cup on the right, one of the things I try to do when I travel is have some semblance of what it's like back home. So I'm a Starbucks fan. So I go to Starbucks, and in Asia, they don't want to print out Stringer or anything else. So all the clients and all the people I know call me Mr. Paul, my first name. So I'm known over there as Mr. Paul. And so when they get a cup, they write Mr. Paul on the cup. Kind of fun. This is the gate to the city in Seoul, Hanoi Opera House, Bangkok, Thailand. This is a caddy in Japan. Very sophisticated system there with the carts. A lot of people in Vietnam selling flowers. Global statistics, I want to just show you this real quick just as a state, but you know India's past China now in population and will fly by China because of the population growth. Indonesia and Pakistan will fly by us in population. We'll be down to 5 or 6 population-wise. Cities, Tokyo's still up there. Shanghai and Beijing kind of knock around the 30 million people. And then I put the top languages of the world. How many speak a different language other than English? I always advise people to learn another language. 2 things I always recommend: learn another language, take a foreign assignment. You'll learn so much about yourself, and you'll learn about the world. This is just a global footprint of where our courses are. Obviously, the most are in the U.S. We're in 41 U.S. states, and now about 53 countries. I've been to all 50 states other than one. Anybody take a guess what state? Most people will say Alaska or Hawaii. Michigan. Maine. Who said Maine? Winner, chicken dinner. I've never been to Maine, and it's not far from Florida, so somebody said, you should just travel up to Maine so you can tick all the boxes. Work-life balance, you know, the easiest thing we can do, and I'm guilty of this, is working too much. And you guys probably study too much at times, or you feel like you don't study enough, or you don't give your friends enough time. What I like to say is be organized. Prioritize your task. It's a balance. It's not 50-50. Sometimes it's 70-30. Sometimes it's 60-40. It's not a perfect world. But take enough time. And you heard good wisdom from our president just a little while ago about the importance of exercise. Exercise, rest, keeps you young at heart. Listen to music, read. Read as much as you possibly can. Look, I studied in education. I've done more in international business than most people in business. And it's just because you learn by doing, and you learn by reading, and you learn by observing. I learned so much when I travel around and learn from different people, different cultures. They don't speak English, but I still learn a lot. Technology. How many have heard of TGL? Tomorrow's Golf League. It was on ESPN. We did 15 of those courses with our company. And I was there. This is down in West Palm Beach near where I live. It's about 5 minutes from the office, but we went there when they were building it. SoFi is the big supporter of this. It's beautiful, but it's a fun league. When it comes back on, which is January, somewhere in there, watch it, TGL. It's in Palm Beach, and we'll do probably 15 more of the courses. This was a course that we're doing in the metaverse, so it's to be built, but it's not a real course. It's through AI. This is an AI golf course. Technology, learn whatever you can about AI, and I know you guys are, but AI is going to be so prevalent out there. We'll probably be designing courses through AI. Right now, we do it, we have a production team in-house. We're one of the few companies that does all the production. When I say production, we do the design plans. The designer will go out, they'll do their drawings, they'll do their dimensions, they'll do their boundaries, and all the contours, because contours are real important for drainage and irrigation and those kind of things, so that's very important. But this is in Sheba, Saudi Arabia, that we did this course, and we did a study for these people. It was the middle of absolutely nowhere, nothing but sand dunes, and it was spectacular, but it didn't make sense because there was no airlift. You got to have airlift. You got to get people to the courses, and there wasn't enough population around it. This is, again, what TGL was. They used real turf, and when the turf got beat up, they'd have a timeout at the commercials, and they'd take these 6-foot squares, almost the size of the stage, and they'd lift it out with these huge hoists and put a whole new piece in that they had in the back, brand new turf, and then they would use that. But that was a lot of fun to see. We did a little golf park in Utah, Red Ledges, not far out of Salt Lake, Park City. That was a good contract. I did the contract there with a guy that used to be the chairman and CEO of Ryder Van Lines. You remember Ryder, big moving company out of Miami? We got a call one time from Cirque du Soleil, from their team in Vegas, and they said, there's a parking lot outside the hotel, and we want to convert it to a putting green. Here's creativity, right? And we want to do a putting contest and a putting tournament. We said, okay, where? It's on the parking lot. Okay, give us the dimensions. So we built a putting course, 18-hole synthetic turf. They would have tournaments on there where it was $10,000 to the winner. And they did that for about a year. And then they built something else on the parking lot, but right in the heart of Vegas. So the point is, we have to be really creative at times. A lot of good relationships. You can see me with President Bush, Gary Player in the middle. He's 90 years old now. Ian Poulter, Jack, that was in Morocco. Annika Sorenstam, the best lady golfer. Greg Norman when I started with Troon. That's when I had a little bit of hair. And then up right, you can see Jack with Tiger and President Trump. Matt Kuchar on the left. This was a great one. I got invited up to the Supreme Court, and that's Justice Kennedy when he was retiring. And it was kind of funny. There was probably 200 of us there at this invitation up at the Supreme Court. And he said, "You're with Nicklaus?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, do you know this course?" I talked to him for like 20 minutes, and the people are getting irritated behind me in line because they couldn't get to shake his hand, and he wanted to keep talking golf, and I finally had to leave him. But Justin Thomas, who just played on the Ryder Cup, Andy North, who won a couple U.S. Opens, Jack Nicklaus II, and then that's the chairman of Toro. They're about a $4 billion company out of Minneapolis doing irrigation equipment for golf, but do a lot of home products as well. And final thoughts, this is a course we did in China, and I'm looking at this lake because we had to fill some of the lake to do the golf course. This is one of the gals I hired in Vietnam. She does a great job. Her name's Mimi Din, speaks great English, helps me with contracts and with people. I say your career path is squiggly, meaning your career path is never going to be a straight line. What you do tomorrow is never going to be what you do 5, 10 years from now. more than likely. So you have to pivot, adjust to whatever you think is right. I like surrounding myself with positive people. I'm a half-full guy. I look at life that way. I look at my job that way. I think you should surround yourself with positive people. I call it soft skills. Flexible, adaptable people. I'm a baseball junkie, so I use this term 3 outs. Outwork, outthink, and outlast others. If you do those three things, you're going to fly past your coworkers. Trust the process. I said simplify your life like Zuckerberg and Jobs. I don't know if you know this about Zuckerberg or Jobs, but they would wear the same thing every day. The same thing. People say, why do you wear the same thing? Because it simplifies my life. I don't have to think about what I'm wearing tomorrow. I tell my wife, I lay out my clothes the night before. How many people do that? Okay, so I'm not the only idiot. I lay out my clothes the night before every night. You know why? Because your alarm might go late. You might not have your stuff ironed or ready to go. And I'm just one of those guys that has to be prepared. And I said this, disruption is an opportunity. And what I mean by disruption, there are many events that will come up in your life that are a disruption. Look what we just had. We went through a huge pandemic that threw the country in a tailspin for 2, 3, 4 years. We're still recovering, right? So there's always going to be a disruption along the way. I remember when I grew up, a lot of people here probably think, you know, life's tough right now. There's a lot of distractions, a lot of things going on. The economy's bad, government's bad. If you're not on one side, somebody else, whatever. Well, I grew up in the Vietnam era, and I registered for the draft. I didn't get called. But my neighbor, when I lived in Southern California, I was in 9th grade. He was 19 years old. He dropped out of Fullerton Junior College at the time. His parents said, you got to stay in college because we got the Vietnam War going on. So he said, yeah, no problem, I'll do that. So fast forward 6 months, he's drafted, and I see the Army car pull in front of our house. Stepped on a mine in Cambodia and killed himself at 19. So the Vietnam War was a terrible, terrible war and time for us. We've been through a lot of tough times as a society, but we always rebound. And that's why you got to stay positive, because the way it is today isn't going to be the way it is tomorrow. Have confidence, be positive. And I put up here a few of my favorite quotes along some of the golf courses. How beautiful is this? This is in Denmark, Cabo, on a cliff. And I had to put the cactus because Arizona still means a lot to me. Knowledge is Power by Francis Bacon. How do you dispute that? Journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. I put that in my Vietnam magazine article when they did the Q&A on me because I thought that was a great quote. So you're going to come up with quotes that resonate for you. Don't go by my quotes, but these resonate with me. Every problem has a solution, right? People say, well, no, it doesn't. Okay. Then try to make it better. That's where I attack. But I love to challenge people when there's a problem. Everybody's quick at saying what the problem is. How quick are you at coming up with the solution? Let's work on it together. This is where I live, and this is where the video is embedded. I don't know if we can play it. There was an arrow down here. I don't know if we can play it or not. We have a lot of gators in South Florida, and where I live in Ibis, it's a 3-course planned community. But just watch this. Okay, you can see the gator up here is moving, right? Female. These guys are amazing when they get up on their hind legs. He finally gives up because that's a lot of walking. She's not worth it today. So no matter what path you take in your career, be confident in yourself and enjoy the journey. With that, I say thank you.
Well, Professor Dunlop, do you want to come up to the stage right now? And would you mind taking a seat here, Paul? And we've got about 15 minutes for Q&A. So if we could get that started and think about any questions you might want to ask in the next 15 minutes. And
thank you. I hope that was okay.
See what the answers are. So.
Thank you, Patrick. But I believe we negotiated 20 minutes. So,
sorry.
Well, that was a pretty amazing presentation. Would you agree? Yeah. Let's give another hand. Yeah.
Thank you.
Paul, welcome to EWU.
Thank you.
I can only imagine you never thought you'd be standing on the stage when you were a student.
No, I didn't. And it's been a pleasure coming back. It really has. It's been a squiggly path for sure, but it's been a great ride and always fun to come back and connect with Eastern. I was telling somebody at lunch today, it was the greatest time of my life being here. Played on golf team. Some of my teammates are here tonight, and met my wife of now 43 years. Yes, I'm an old guy. So it's been a great ride.
The OG working for the GOAT.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, everyone, we have time for approximately 10 questions. So I'm going to begin, but Nick is going to notice whoever might have something that you would like to ask, and we'd like to get to as many of your questions as we can. So raise your hand. As soon as Nick sees it, he'll come to you, and just give me one or 2 minutes if you would. So one of the first questions that I asked you when we met was what it feels like in a Gulfstream jet flying at 0.83 Mach, so nearly the speed of sound, at 44,000 feet. And you mentioned that you've actually sat in the cockpit during that.
Yeah, I did. I sat in the cockpit many times. Jack, like a lot of GOATs or high-intensity athletes or people, are tough, and they can be tough. So whenever I got on the plane with Jack and I'd be sitting across from him, he'd be asking me a few questions. And some of them were about, okay, where are we going along the trip, and what do I need to do, and blah, 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 plan out his whole agenda. So after I got past all that, we were going to Asia, but we go through Anchorage to stop and get gas. And so we're going into Anchorage to get gas, and he had a friend there that we would see, and they'd fill up the G5 at the time. And when we'd fly from there to Beijing or wherever we go in Seoul, it was another 7, 8, 9 hour trip, and that's a long time from South Florida because you're in the plane a long time. So one of the things to kill time, because I didn't sleep much on the plane, is I'd go up into the cockpit, and we had a pilot and a co-pilot, and we had food on the plane. They fixed us food, which was great, but I would be up in the cockpit, and I learned a lot about the instrumentation, and I'd say, Ronnie, where are the planes? Where are all the planes? And he'd say, look on the screen here, and there were dots all over the place, and he said, we're going to pass a plane that's, whatever it was, 10,000 feet below us, and sure enough, we'd see this plane. And it was a great experience, and I've been in a lot of turbulence. So last year, I probably was in one of the top 2 or 3 turbulence. I thought I was going down in Vietnam between Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi. It was a bad storm, and we bounced and rolled, and people were sick, and it was an awful experience. But here I am. But a lot of experiences flying in the plane. One experience that you'll get a kick out of. So we're going into Shanghai, and we came from Hong Kong. And in Shanghai, our pilot's visa had expired, but they didn't know it. So they grounded the plane, and we were going on to Beijing from Shanghai. So that meant we had to all go. There's like 8 of us in the party, and we had to get tickets, and we had our representative with us, Marcia, and we had to get tickets to fly up to Beijing, so we did that, and that meant Jack was traveling. They had no business class, so we had to fly in the back of the bus, which was fine. So of all things, when we got our tickets, Jack had the middle seat in the back of the plane, and he's flying private, right? He never flies commercial. So I said, Jack, really, I said, you have the aisle seat, I'll take the middle seat, no problem. He goes, no, I'll take the middle seat. So he takes up, the little magazine, in-flight magazine, puts it behind his head, and he could sleep anywhere. He went out like a light. And so those are one of those type of experience you wish never happened, but it did, and you kind of roll with it.
Amazing. Just amazing. I can't even imagine. Is his seat really blue on the plane?
No.
No, it was in the magazine article.
Yeah, no, it's a different color, but no, he could sleep on the plane very easy. The rest of us kind of took cat naps, didn't really sleep much.
Well, thank you. Let's go ahead with our first question. First, please give your name and then your major and then your question, please.
Hi, I'm Aiden Franklin. I am a accounting major here, going into my senior year. And I see, looking at a lot of your golf courses, you do a lot of geographical change and things like that. I know golf courses can sometimes be kind of controversial. So how do you deal with the controversy where possibly many of the locals don't like the idea of a golf course being built because A, it's going to destroy the natural landscape, or B, be inaccessible to them?
Good question. Thank you for the question. In today's environment, there's a lot of protection, both on the environmental side and the permitting side. And we battle that in every country where they have pretty tough permits. In California, it takes 12 years to get your permit to build a golf course now, if you do it. You have to use affluent water, so you're not using fresh water, you're using treated water for the most part. It creates a lot of jobs in these countries where they're looking for employment, which is anywhere from 50 to 300 people. So from that standpoint, the economic value, not everybody can join the club, but sometimes there's courses that we do that are public golf courses that everybody can play. And we'll do driving ranges and putting greens and other golf amenities that people can afford and play. But it depends on where we're building it, but they all have different permitting challenges. But we've won a lot of awards for being stewards of the environment, and so we work well together. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question, Aiden. We'd also like to invite the folks that are watching online, if you'd like to participate, ask a question, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll bring you in as well. One of the other questions that, and I mentioned to you, I have like a list this long. One of my questions is, through your career, 35 years, is there one thing that really stands out to you that you're most proud of or that you really enjoyed the most?
Besides getting married?
Good job.
I would say probably the course I did, or that we did in Korea, Jack Nicklaus Golf Club Korea, because when I first saw that, and half of it was underwater, that was the one where we did for President's Cup for the first time in Asia, and half of it was underwater. It had to be really creative. And I came back and I told Jack, and Jack said, how did it go? And I said, well, it went good. He's got a lot of vision. It's 1,500 acres. They want to do a master plan community, but half of it's underwater. And Jack rolls his eyes and he just said, that'll never happen. And so fast forward, we have the President's Cup. I was telling some of the guys this last night. I go to the President's Cup dinner, and I don't know why I was at the VIP table, but next to me is Jerry West, who just recently passed, but one of the great basketball players of all time. Franco Harris, one of the best running backs that ever lived, sitting next to me there. President Bush, and here is Paul Stringer, the EWU graduate from 1979. How did I get at that table?
No, you should have been the first one at that table.
Yeah, right. But that's how things happen, and you kind of create your own luck, right?
Well, thank you. And when I think back on my career, I sometimes learned much more from the things that didn't go right, from what people would call the failures. So I'm wondering if there was a failure that really shaped your life or made one of those divots that you had to get through. Is there anything like that you could share?
There's always things that could have worked out better. I have kind of my own personal mantra is I don't have any regrets. There are things I might have done differently or made some changes to what I did. When I moved down to Arizona, I told you when I left the teaching job and went down there, there were no assistant pro jobs because everybody was moving down to Arizona to do the same thing. So I worked at a golf retail store for a year, but that helped me really network and got my resume out to different clubs and learned about different clubs. But that wasn't the type of job I wanted to be at, but I knew it was a stepping stone to going where I was. But I don't really look at that as a failure. I did okay financially, and it gave me some time to really look at where I wanted to go in the golf business.
Thank you. Is there another question from the audience?
Yes, and I do have one from Zoom or
Okay,
YouTube as well,
take
if you'd
that
like.
one then.
Yes, so this is from Jasmine Hoff. I understand that you went from teaching to deciding to move to Arizona with no job right away when starting this path. I would love to know how you found the confidence to take that jump.
I think I mentioned this when I first was talking about this, but both my wife and I were educated, thanks to Eastern. And, we had confidence in ourselves. We were both educated. We were going to a state that was growing leaps and bounds. Cotton fields were turning into homes and businesses. She got into the mortgage business by default. She had a great, successful career in the mortgage business, ran many companies. And I knew that if I started looking around, I could find my way. And, my teaching career didn't pay a lot at that time, so everything I made, I saved. And we just had confidence that we could do it. And we didn't have, the biggest thing I can tell you guys in this room, other than maybe some school debt, is we didn't have debt. I paid cash for that car. I lived in an apartment. We didn't have any debt. And so when we moved to Arizona, we started out with no debt. And I worked going through school. I had a grant. It was a scholarship, but it was really grant money. I worked as a resident advisor at one of the dorms. I was a janitor for 2 years. I worked summers at golf courses doing maintenance at 5:30 in the morning. So you make some sacrifices, but I saved money so that I could have some for a rainy day. And so when we moved down to Arizona, we just had the confidence that we were going to find something and be successful.
Well, it sounds like Martin Luther King once said that he didn't need to see the whole staircase. He just needed to see the first step.
Yeah.
Is that the way you felt?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I've always, I was a pretty shy guy growing up, very quiet. My dad was one of the best salesmen that ever lived, and he was a very quiet, down-to-earth guy. And, I think, like I said, you pivot and you move around and you learn from people and you put yourself in tough positions, and it's up to you to succeed or not. And we just knew that when we went down to Arizona, we would succeed, and we did.
So that's something I guess we'd call confidence, right? You have confidence in yourself to take that step. There was a question in the room. While we're waiting for that question, is Jack Nicklaus still involved in designing golf courses, or?
He's out on his own right now. He's 85. He's doing a couple things on the side, but he's pretty much retired. But he's still doing a couple different designs. But right now we have 65 golf courses under contract where we're either doing some renovation or some modification or new builds, and that's in about 25 countries. So I'll be moving around for a while. Everybody says, "When are you going to retire?" I said, "Not yet."
It's
But
not
soon.
time to retire.
But soon.
But
I'm enjoying it.
Maybe come back to being a teacher again. I
Yeah,
thought
there you
did
go.
a great job teaching tonight. Thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Go ahead.
All right, so my name's Josh. I'm a marketing major here, also my senior year. I'm just curious that working abroad over 100 countries, I'm sure you've ran into situations with culture clash with some of your clients. Can you go and give an example of that and how you worked through it?
Well, I was saying at lunch today, I was in Papua New Guinea trying to do a golf course there. 90 years ago, they believed in cannibalism. And I was on site, and a native guy came out on the field. Keep in mind, a lot of these countries, like China, they don't own the land. The government owns the land. They're squatters or they live there. But this guy came out with a shotgun and actually fired at us. And that was the end of my Papua New Guinea trip. Yeah, but there's a lot of oil and gas and a lot of expats. Oil, there's Exxon, Shell, Mobil, all the big oil companies are there. And so the expats want to do something because there's nothing to do there, so they wanted to build a golf course. But apparently this guy didn't want it, so we didn't build it. But there's been several examples like that where it's been tricky, where we thought we'd be more successful. I was in Kazakhstan and Almaty, and I thought we'd do a golf course there, and the crash came, and this guy that had car dealerships, he had camels, he had flowers, he had a food market, he had all these different things. And so we do this contract and we go to Almaty, to this place, and our rep Vincent, because it's one of the former Russian states obviously, and they have a nice buffet spread. There's cheeses and fruits and everything, but all this kind of meat. So we get towards the end of the night, and it was one of those things too where you sit at a table and there's like 20 or 30 of us at this long linear table. And so this guy, I'll never forget, he says, okay, and there were shot glasses in front of all of us. And he says, okay, I want everybody to stand up and tell us why you like being involved with this project. It was an ego play for him. He just wanted to hear how great his property was and how great he was. So he had me sitting to his left. I was the first one to go. So I stood up and I told him, it's a great site. We're going to do a great golf course, and this is going to be terrific, and blah, blah, blah. So everybody knocks back a shot of vodka. They come and fill the glasses again. And then it's this person's turn. Well, after 20 shots, you're kind of spinning in the room. So I asked the guy afterwards, our rep, and I said, so what was on the table on the buffet? And he said, all different types of camel meat. And it was tough, it was not good, and we had camel milk, and I've eaten live things in China and some things that I can't tell you in this environment what I was eating, but I've only been sick in two places. One was in Mexico, and the other was in Cairo, Egypt.
Okay, I'm seeing that I'm about to be booted off the stage. Is there one more questions from the audience, just a short one, or? Okay, great. Thank you guys for, oh, did I miss one, Patrick? Oh, okay. All right.
Hi, I'm Manny. I'm a friend of Dr. Jones, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on the current state of golf, since you're very involved in it. I know you mentioned the Ryder Cup a couple times. Mm-hmm. Viewership in America versus your viewership in other parts of the world. Where do you feel are some of the more accepting places where people, the Ryder Cup incident is a very good example. Where do you feel that's going to continue in other places, or is that just a very specific American issue there?
Well, good question, and thank you. COVID really kicked golf in a different market. The golf business grew by 25 to 30% during COVID, and according to National Golf Foundation, I think it'll level at like 20%, so there's still a lot of growth in the US domestic. But we have, just as an example, we have 15,000 golf courses in the US for a population of 350 million people. In China, they have 400 golf courses, and they're at 1.5 billion people. There was a moratorium that Xi Jinping put out that said that they weren't going to do any golf because it was elitist. Now they're flipping the tune because their economy wasn't doing so good, and they're going to golf tourism. And there's supposed to be an announcement in March that they're going to build 2,000 golf courses. So if that happens, we'll do another 30 courses in China. But to answer your question, the fastest growth is in Vietnam, Cambodia. We just finished one in Laos. Some of the Asian countries, Indonesia, we're doing some golf. That's growing a lot. They love their golf. Philippines. Korea's a little bit stagnant. Japan's a little bit stagnant. Still some domestically. We're doing a lot in South America, Central America. See some growth there. What it is it's two things. It offers people jobs. It offers a chance to recreate. The developer sells homes around it, and they make their money by selling real estate. So it's an amenity for real estate. It's an amenity for hotels. So in public golf, like Spokane, Steve's at what was used to be called Hangman Valley, but you guys have great public golf for not very much money here in Spokane. It's fantastic. It's a great golf city for public golf. And there's other parts. Florida's got a lot of private golf, so it's mainly private residential communities, and it's expensive. So it's kind of area by area, but I see it continuing to climb. Certain areas it'll flatten out a little bit. In other areas it'll continue to grow.
Thank you. Was there one final question?
Paul, I was wondering, Jack had an incredible brand.
Could you please?
Tim Collins, Director of Athletics here at Eastern. Jack had an incredible brand as a player, but then how did he get that to transition into building a company, and how did you guys steward that brand?
Good question. I think in 1969, Pete Dye, who was an insurance salesman in Indiana, wanted him to look at Hilton Head of all places. And so Jack flew in there while he was playing at Hilton Head 26 times to look at it. And Pete was an insurance salesman, but he was in the same area that Jack lived. And he had moved over to Ohio and knew Jack's dad. But long story short is Jack started from his playing career. He had a good eye. He had a very good eye. And most designers weren't as strategical as Jack because he had an eye for it playing. And so he developed this eye and then eventually started creating some golf courses. And then once he did that, he had some tournaments like the Memorial Tournament and some others that put it on the map. And people realized right away he's not just a good golfer, but he's a great designer. And, having the success that he had in golf, 18 majors and 2 U.S. amateurs didn't hurt. So he had a lot of, in 1986, he won the Masters at 46, and they couldn't believe he could do it. So that's incredible that happened. And a success story ever since.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One last question I'd like to ask is, for the students here, a lot of them are probably still wondering what they want to do, where they want to go. Do you have any final advice for them as to looking at their career? I know you talked about pivots, but is there any other advice you'd like to give?
Well, I think, one of the things I did say is to learn another language, but go on vacation somewhere. If you can save some money and go to a foreign place and take a look at it and see if that place is where you might want to do a little career opportunity. But I think some of the best experience I had was living abroad. And you learn so much about yourself and the cultures and figuring it out and moving around. And I had never been in a bullet train. And like I said, I missed a lot of stops in Tokyo, going past stops and figuring out where I was going. But you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about discipline. You learn a lot about other cultures. And it's fascinating what you learn. And being in 95 countries now, every country is different, and you learn and take a little bit away from you each time. So try to get a foreign assignment if you can, even if it's for a couple of years. You're young enough. You can always come back and work in the U.S., but it may stick. You might like it where you are.
Thank you very much. Thanks for sharing your vision, your knowledge, your experience, your stories. I've really enjoyed the evening, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Hang in there, Paul. We've got a little presentation, and Linda and Margie, go ahead. We got to get a photo of this, right, Lorna?
I realize you have probably a lot of awards, but at EWU, we'd like to give you this one for your
Fantastic.
beautiful office.
Thank you very much.
And I'm not sure if this was
Thank you.